The other thing is that this border has been peaceful since 1962, when after ceasefire was agreed between the two sides, there hasn't been a single shot across this border. We've got armies on both sides, we have forces on both sides, but it's been a very peaceful and tranquil border.
Julian, I can see you nodding at that. Let's just talk about the wider implications. How closely...
There are occasions...
Sorry, go on, Julian.
Well, there have been some altercations, and India's had the upper hand since shortly after 1962. It's a logistical problem. China can't have more than 4 divisions in Xinjiang, Tibet province. It's simply too difficult to keep them supplied, particularly as you approach the Indian border. India today has 11 mountain divisions, which could easily overpower China if there's a fight. So there's no retake of 1962. But the key deterrent event that put India in the stronger position occurred in 1967 in Sikkim at Latu Na, where the Chinese showed up with artillery and then the Indians counterattacked with artillery. It was a pretty intense artillery fight in 1967. And there was 20 years of peace until the mid-80s. And at Sundarang Cho in 1987, you had an almost clash between 2 large patrols of Indians and Chinese. And since then, it's been mostly quiescent. So it's not true that it's been completely peaceful. There's certainly no casus belli. There is no incentive for China to move against India at this point, because India is actually very cooperative with China. In 62, India
can I just jump in there and ask whether or not more recent changes might have had an effect? For example, could China be growing concerned at India's increasing relationship with the US?
Yes, but it's a very peculiar way of confronting them. If China wanted to confront India's relationship with the US, it would probably not do it in the Himalayas. It would do it in Pakistan or Myanmar, or where it's got allies, put warships in the Indian Ocean to demonstrate that India has to pay attention to China. It is a very opaque message if this is what China is trying to communicate. If China's worried about infiltrators into its far territories, it's got to be worried about its ally, Pakistan, which has on and off supported the Uyghurs. And of course, Beijing has told Pakistanis not to do this, but India's been very cooperative with China. This is not a replay of the 1962. Then, the U.S. government flew Khampa Tibetan rebels with the help of the Indians to Colorado, trained them, and flew them back in 1958. And China protested to India that India was trying to support a rebellion in Tibet. India is not doing that today. There's no strategic reason for China to be doing this. So I would deduce it's simply aggressive patrolling. And the Chinese are very aggressive when they patrol their borders with whichever neighbor.
Let me bring Andrew on this, because I want to know what you make of that, and also what do you make of this this line of thinking that perhaps the sort of confusion happening in the border is in part because China is worried by India's growing influence and growing military ties with the US.
Well, I think that there's no doubt that, for example, China's influence in the Southeast Asia is extremely very strong, and America is trying to line up countries like India and also Japan as a kind of hedging. But on the other hand, neither America nor China wants this to be an issue for confrontation. There is no gain on both sides. And on the other hand, as far as the regional dominance is concerned, there is no doubt that China's the leading position in the area is extremely strong. I don't think that China would necessarily worry about the Indians being a threat. On the other hand, there are lots of interest on both sides for both sides to cooperate. So I tend to agree that this kind of skirmishes and whatever, in fact, it doesn't represent China's national policy, because there's absolutely no gain for China to do that.
Well, let's take a look. Let's take a breather and take a look at the developing military trade relationship between US and India. In 2005, the two countries signed a 10-year defense agreement committing their military forces to enhanced cooperation and technological development. In 2008, the US sold 6 C-130J Hercules military transport aircraft to India, worth $1 billion. In July this year, Hillary Clinton visited India, paving the way for greater military cooperation and trade between the two countries. And US firms are currently competing to supply India with 126 combat aircraft, 197 light observation helicopters and 22 combat helicopters. Mohan, Andrew there was saying that China's probably not worried by India developing its trade deals like this. What do you think, though? Is India doing this deliberately?
I think the suggestion that India will line up with the US because the US wants it to line up is absurd. India will do what's in its interest, okay? And, you know, if the US is bidding for equipment sale in India, they're bidding like all others. The French are bidding, the Russians are bidding, the British are bidding, you know, so it doesn't matter. We would buy the aircraft which is probably the best and which we have the best commercial terms with. So no, I don't see any growing US influence here. We've had a few more exercises, but it doesn't mean that we've become an American ally or an American subject state, you know. Suddenly,
but there's no doubt the relationship puts it
quite
on a different footing on the world stage, isn't there? There's no doubt that that relationship with the US makes India a stronger nation.
Well, I don't know at this moment. I don't think that really matters. And at this moment, you know, there was a good personal equation between George Bush and the Indian leadership. I don't think that really exists right now. Mrs. Clinton came and she spent 5 days here, but 4.5 days were on theatre. And half a day he had one meeting and didn't really amount to very much here. So I think people are reading too much into this. Actually, I would worry about the US's entanglement with China. The Chinese have got $1.5 trillion in US bonds. They have a great trade relationship. They have surpluses building up with the US all the time. And this is something which is destabilizing the world's economy. I think US is really linked up with China, and it's very difficult for it to, you know, to take sides in the situation.
Julian, what do you make of the relationship? I mean, presumably, given the current economic situation, the last thing that the US wants to do is upset China.
Yes, there is in the background a non-strategic relationship there. India is the largest democracy, and so automatically the U.S. is going to be very sympathetic to India, even if India is not going to reciprocate. But I mean, I would disagree with the earlier response. The U.S. is definitely trying to bolster India, even if India doesn't want to necessarily closely cooperate with the U.S. for historical reasons to do with non-alignment and anti-capitalism. There's no question the U.S. wants to build up India in the same way they sort of tried to France in the late 60s and early 70s, particularly with the on and off agreement on a civilian nuclear sharing. The U.S. wants India to keep up with China. The U.S. definitely sees China as the emerging threat, but of course they don't want to be too explicit about it. The quadrennial reviews of the Pentagon way back in the 90s and early 2000s more or less directed the U.S. to shift its forces from NATO to the Pacific. And the U.S. has been doing that, but very slowly, because they don't want to provoke China, and India fits into that larger framework. So I would agree that there is a shift. The U.S. is definitely coming to South Asia to try to get India to be stronger, but it's very slow.
Let me throw another nugget into the discussion. Examining last year's US-India civil nuclear agreement, Lisa Curtis of the think tank The Heritage Foundation concluded that China's attempt to scuttle the agreement was evidence for many Indians that China does not willingly accept India's rise on the world stage, nor the prospect of closer US-India ties. Andrew, is that true? Did China try and scuttle that agreement?
Well, I think that China, of course, doesn't want nuclear proliferation, nor does the United States. I mean, only recently there was a talk about, sort of North Korea and Iran. And of course, what worries China is not so much India or Iran or North Korea, but the possibility of spreading to Japan.
But this foundation particularly says it's the prospect of closer US-India ties which upsets China.
Well, I think that this is the reality. I don't think that China, of course, takes into account the global position. America is both an ally and also a possible threat. But on the other hand, China is now very much enmeshed into the international order. There is no way that China confront or completely change this international order. And it's very much in China's interest to work with his biggest partner, trade, economics, and so on, of America, and also with India. So I don't think that it would be in China's interest to provoke any confrontation with India at this stage.
Okay, let's go back to Mohan for just a last word on this, and particularly with regards to the border dispute that we started with.
Well, I'll go back to the IAEA agreement on nuclear energy. China did try to scuttle it. There's no doubt about it. China has opposed India's entry into the Security Council, and the consistent trends, which the Chinese say is going to change in time. But we'll wait and see on that. But as far as the border is concerned, I think the two interlocutors on both sides, our National Security Advisor and the Chinese Ambassador Dai Bingguo, had a very good meeting a few weeks ago. The atmosphere was very good. The statements were very positive. Both sides said we made some headway. And the Chinese went back to Beijing and said that it's time now to have a full settlement. And let's hope something works out.
Okay, so I think we've all agreed that it doesn't look like that conflict is going to escalate. Let's hope we're all right. So thank you very much indeed for joining me, gentlemen. Mohan Guruswamy in New Delhi, Andrew Leung in London, and Julian Schofield in Montreal. And thank you for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We do welcome your comments and suggestions. Email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. But for the moment, from me, Shuli Ghosh, bye-bye for now.